Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, accompanied by the Vice President. There it is. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us this morning. We are pleased to have you share in the historic signing of the Family and Medical Leave Act. Today marks the end of gridlock and a new beginning. Many families all over this country know why this legislation is so critical. Indeed, my wife Tipper and I met many families when we were with our son at Johns Hopkins Hospital who will benefit from legislation, from this legislation. And it is appropriate today for the President of the United States to be introduced by representatives of one of the American families that this bill really is designed to help. I would like to introduce to you George and Vicki Yandel. I first met the Yandels in September of 1992 right here in Washington, D.C. Both the Yandels and I and Tipper were in Washington to advocate the Family and Medical Leave Act. And you see, in January 1987, George and Vicki's daughter, Dixie, was diagnosed with cancer. The severity of the cancer required immediate treatment, forcing both the Yandels to take time off from their jobs. George and Vicki subsequently lost their jobs because there was no law such as the Family and Medical Leave Act. So it's my pleasure to stand here with George and Vicki Yandel today and have the opportunity to introduce them to introduce the President of the United States.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. My husband and I thanks the Congress for passing the Family and Medical Leave Act and the President for signing it. Our family needed protection like the ones provided in this law. Our family has faced a terrible tragedy, but this tragedy was made unnecessarily harder for us by the fact that George did not have job security during this time. In times of family crisis, people should not have to worry about keeping their jobs. They should not be forced to choose between their loved ones and the jobs they need. Thanks to the President Clinton, Other families will not have to face a terrible choice. I left my daughter Dixie in the hospital to be here. I have the great honor of introducing the man who made this law happen, the President of the United States, Mr. Bill Clinton.
Great job. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Mrs. Yandel, I never had a better introduction. Before we thank anyone else, I think all of us should acknowledge that it was America's families who have beaten the gridlock in Washington to pass family leave. People like this fine woman all over America who talked to members of Congress, both Democrat and Republican, who laid their plight out, who asked that their voices be heard. When Senator Gore and I ran in the election last year, we published a book called Putting People First. I'm very proud that the first bill I am to sign as president truly puts people first. I do want to thank the United States Congress for moving expeditiously on this matter and for doing it before the first recess so that every member of Congress who voted for this bill can go home and say, we are up there working on your problems and your promise, trying to make a better future for you. This sends a clearer signal than any words any of us could utter that we have tried to give this government back to the American people. And I'm very appreciative that the Congress has moved so rapidly on this bill. There are many, many members of Congress here and many others who are not here who played a major role in this legislation. Time does not permit me to mention them all, but I do want to thank the Senate Majority Leader for his heroic efforts in the 11th hour to make sure we pass this bill, Senator Kennedy and Senator Dodd for their passionate and years-long commitment to this effort. I want to thank the Speaker, Speaker Foley, and Congressman Ford, the chairman of the committee that had jurisdiction over this bill, and Congresswoman Pat Schroeder, and all the other Democrats who worked on this bill. But I want to acknowledge, too, consistent with the promise I made in my inaugural, to reach out to members of both parties who would try to push for progress, that this bill also had passionate support among Republicans. My old colleague in the Governors Association, Senator Kit Bond from Missouri, I thank you for your leadership. Senator Jeffords and Senator Coates, I don't believe are here, but they supported this bill strongly. And Congresswoman Marge Rockema from New Jersey, her commitment on this was unwavering. Congresswoman Susan Molinari from New York and many other Republicans voted for, spoke for, and worked for this bill. I thank them, the subcommittee chairs who are here, and all the others who worked so hard to make this bill a real, live promise kept of the Congress to the people of the United States. Family and medical leave has always had the support of a majority of Americans from every part of the country, from every walk of life, from both political parties. But some people opposed it, and they were powerful, and it took 8 years and 2 vetoes to make this legislation the law of the land. Now, millions of our people will no longer have to choose between their jobs and their families. The law guarantees the right of up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave per year when it's urgently needed at home to care for a newborn child or an ill family member. This bill will strengthen our families, and I believe it will strengthen our businesses and our economy as well. I have spent an enormous amount of time in the last 12 years in the factories and businesses of this country, talking to employers and employees, watching the way people work, often working with them. And I know that men and women are more productive when they are sure they won't lose their jobs because they're trying to be good parents, good children. Our businesses should not lose the services of these dedicated Americans. And over the long run, the lessons of the most productive companies in the world, here at home and around the world, are that those who put their people first are those who will triumph in the global economy. The business leaders who have already instituted family and medical leave understand this, and I'm very proud of some of the business leaders who are here today who represent not only themselves but others all across America who were ahead of all of us who make laws in doing what is right by our families. Family and medical leave is a matter of pure common sense and a matter of common decency. It will provide Americans what they need most, peace of mind. Never again will parents have to fear losing their jobs because of their families. Just a week ago, I spoke to 10 people in families who had experienced the kinds of problems Mrs. Yandel has talked about today. Vice President Gore and I talked to people all across America who moved us deeply. We were saddened to hear their stories, but today all of us can be happy to think of their future. Now that we have won this difficult battle, let me ask all of you to think about what we must do ahead to put the public interest ahead of special interests, to pass a budget which will grow this economy and shrink our deficit, and to go on about the business of putting families first. There's a lot more we need to do to help people trapped in welfare move to work and independence, to strengthen child support enforcement, to reward those who work 40 hours a week and have children at home with an increase in the earned income tax credit so we can really say we're rewarding work instead of dependence. To immunize all the children of this country so more parents won't have to take advantage of family leave because their children will be well and strong and healthy. Let all of us who care about our families, our people, the strength of our economy, and the future of our nation put our partisan and other interests aside and be inspired by this great victory today to have others when Congress returns to this city and we go on about the people's business. Thank you very much. Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, Mrs. Clinton, Mrs. Gore, Mrs. Yandel, members of the Cabinet, distinguished guests, my colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, of the many, many people who have had a leading role in the passage of this landmark legislation, there are members of the Congress in both houses and in both parties, and countless numbers of people in the country. But no one person in the Congress has had a greater role over the years in leading this legislation to its successful conclusion than the man who is my pleasure to introduce to you now. We came to the Congress together 28 years ago as new members in the 89th Congress when Lyndon Johnson was elected President of the United States. All during the time that he has served in the Congress, he has fought hard for many causes, but among all the causes he has fought for the welfare of American working men and women. He is now the distinguished chairman of the Committee on Education and Labor of the House of Representatives. It gives me great pleasure, Mr. President, to present William Ford of Michigan.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, all of the distinguished guests here. I'm going to make a confession to you. During the campaign, a whirlwind named Clinton came through my district several times. And one of the first times we talked out in Michigan, he said, "Bill, how soon can we get family medical leave into law?" My response was, "Mr. Governor, if you get elected and I get elected, Ted Kennedy's already there. We'll have it on your desk whenever you want it." That was a pretty bold promise. But he was serious. And we are here earlier than any time in my years with Tom here in town for a major indication to the American people that last November they made a change and they ended gridlock. And we wouldn't be here except for the people who went to the polls last November and said they wanted us to be here with a bright new president to have us doing what we're doing today. Mr. President, you're going into the history books for this. I want to ride your coattails one more time.
I'd like to now call to the microphone a man who had a lot to do with this legislation, my neighbor, Congressman Bill Clay from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, distinguished guests, and members of Congress. It's a great day that we stand here celebrating this landmark piece of legislation that's in the same category as legislation against child labor, minimum wage, and occupational safety and health. This piece of legislation addresses the needs of a new workforce composed of both husband and wife working, but it's carefully structured to accommodate the needs of small business. In this country, customs and traditions die a hard death, but they do die. And the concept that workers have no rights except those extended by management is a concept that's dying. And family and medical leave is a nail in that coffin that will soon inter the concept that workers have no rights except those extended. So, Mr. President, I know that I speak for the thousands of people in Congress and out of Congress who worked very hard and sacrificed to bring us to this point in time. And I know that I speak for the millions of those who need this legislation and are appreciative of your efforts and the efforts of Congress when I say thank you for using the Family and Medical Leave Act as the vehicle for breaking the legislative logjam between the Congress and the executive office. Thank you.
I'd like to now introduce a person that if I were guessing, I would guess has slept far less than 4 hours a night the last 4 or 5 nights as he worried about whether we could thread the needles necessary to all be here today, the Senate Majority Leader, George Mitchell.
Thank you. The signing of this bill this morning by the President turns an important page in American history. A decade of deadlock has ended. A decade of progress now opens before us. It's especially fitting and appropriate that this Family and Medical Leave Act be the first bill signed by this President to mark this new era for 2 reasons. First, it was passed with bipartisan support. Let all Americans understand this bill could not have become law if only Democrats supported it. Important Republican support by courageous leaders like Kit Bond and Marge Rackham and others helped make this law, and the new era should be bipartisan. Second, it's especially fitting that the first word of the first bill is family. The American family is the foundation of our society, and a family means wherever people are together in whatever form. Single mothers who struggle with their children. A single mother who struggles to raise her children is an American family. Let everyone understand that in our society. Many people worked to make it possible for this to happen, but none deserve more credit than the 2 men who will follow me here at this microphone. Ted Kennedy and Chris Dodd persevered over many long, difficult years. This is their reward
Ultimately, the reward is the knowledge that millions of Americans, some of whom will not know of their efforts, will not know their names, will benefit from what they've done. The real heroes are Ted Kennedy and Chris Dodd. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. All of us in the United States Senate understand that it was really Senator Dodd who 8 years ago started the hearings and the ball moving in that body. Mr. President, we thank you for your leadership on this issue. During the course of the campaign, you said putting American people first. You have put American people first. 12 years of neglect and decline for the workers of this country past. What you have done in signing this law is not only dealing with the parent, the father, or the mother that needs to provide the attention to the child, but you've done so much for the children of this country. All of us know that children improve by more than 50% when they have a parent caring for that particular child. All of us in this country know that the gridlock has ended, and we're looking forward to coming down here on many different occasions, perhaps on the next one on health care, to really deal with the problems of our country. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, Mrs. Clinton, Mrs. Gore, and friends all, colleagues and leadership of the House and the Senate, I'm as proud as you are. Mr. President, I can't tell you, there are many important moments, I guess, in each one of our lives, but this certainly rates darn near at the top for me. To be able to author a bill, the first bill that you'll sign into law, that will touch on three of the most critical issues which you raised so eloquently during the campaign and which you have expressed your concerns about over the years: families, work, and health care. This bill touches on all three of those critical issues: job security during times of a family crisis, holding families together, and being able to have job security so that your family can stay together and have a source of employment. There are many in this country who don't yet know how important this legislation will be to them. Unfortunately, they will face crises. And for those millions of families who've been through these crises, I suspect that this morning they appreciate more poignantly how important this legislation will be to future generations. I just want to let you know how deeply proud all of us are of your deep commitment. We passed this legislation twice. This bill found its way to this building twice before. The difference is we have a president this morning who wanted to make it the law, and I thank you all very, very much. It's my pleasure to present someone to you that the president has already referenced that made a difference. This was a piece of legislation that involved so many people. As the majority leader has said, in a bipartisan way, brought a lot of disparate elements together. Business played a critical role throughout the 7 or 8 years of hearings that we held on this legislation. And it's my pleasure this morning to present one of those representatives of the business community, the president of FelPro, Paul Lehman. Mr. Lehman.
Good morning. On behalf of my brother Ken and my cousin Dave, our co-chairman who are in the audience, and over 2,100 employees at FelPro, I'm pleased to tell you a little bit about family leave at our company. FelPro is an automotive parts and a chemicals manufacturer located in Illinois, California, and Colorado. We're 75 years old and we're family owned. We think of our company as one large family. It's hard not to. Over 50% of our employees are related to someone else in our company. We realize that our products aren't made only by machines, but by a diverse set of people with particular needs, people with people problems, sick children, newborn babies, and elderly relatives. We've had a family leave policy for over 5 years. We didn't introduce it just because we're nice people, but because we believe it's good business. Family leave and our other work and family benefits, such as on-site daycare, elder care, tutoring, and a summer day camp, contribute to a workforce which makes quality products, provides excellent customer service, and is open to the kind of change that has become a daily part of business life. We feel that businesses across America should embrace, rather than fear, family leave and other work and family benefits. They, in combination with other enlightened management practices, will help make U.S. companies fully capable of competing in our global business environment. So President Clinton and esteemed members of the Congress, we at FELPRO salute your signing of this critical bill into law. Thank you. Let me now introduce our next speaker. Major social legislation such as family leave is the result of the dedicated work of concerned citizens and concerned groups. Chief among them is the Women's Defense Fund. I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, the fund's chairperson, Judy Lichtman.
This is a very poignant moment, and my heart is very full. There is no better example of the kind of change the American people sought when they voted in November than the swift and historic signing of this legislation. The first bill signed into law by President Clinton opens a new era, a time when we get beyond the rhetoric and provide real support and economic security for American families who so urgently need it. This legislation marks the beginning of our nation's reinvestment in its most precious resources, its hardworking women, men, and their families. So again, I thank the President, the Congress, and the coalition, a very broad coalition of diverse groups, 250 organizations, representing the best of America, and hundreds of thousands of individuals across this great nation who helped make this moment in history happen. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President wishes to greet personally some of those who've worked so hard to make this law a reality. This concludes the ceremony. Thank you very much for joining us.